town. Where's she going? Oh. See her mother? That's where her mother lives. Carl, I thought you were down there at the South Pole.
Huh?
I thought you were down there at the South Pole right now. It's the same thing.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's a part of tonight's.
Oh. Somebody dropped something. Placed it. Oh.
Good evening, and welcome to the April 16th meeting of the Issaquah Development Commission. This is a very interesting occasion for us for a number of reasons. The first is that this is the first meeting of the Development Commission that will take place under the new guidelines that have been established by the city as a result of their review of the various boards and commissions that exist in the city of Issaquah. So we're going to be using a little bit different process tonight, which I'll outline for you. The second is that we are here tonight to consider the application for what is the first applicant to come forward under the new Central Issaquah plan. So this is an opportunity to consider this and to get public feedback, and that's the purpose of the meeting. So let me tell you how this is going to work this evening. As I said, it's a little bit different for those of you who are familiar with the previous meetings like this that were called community conferences. This is not a community conference. This is considered simply a meeting to consider the application, to get staff input, to hear the applicant, to have the opportunity for public input, after which there will be an opportunity for each of the commissioners to ask questions, seek clarification, and to make comments and recommendations. The way we're going to do this, again, is a little bit different in that the first presentation will be made by the applicant. Previously, the city staff would make the first presentation. It will be made by the applicant in this new process. That will be followed by the city staff. My understanding is that the objective there is in switching the roles is to allow the applicant to make the full presentation, and then the city staff will address issues that were not brought up by the applicant, or to make comments on what the city feels are different positions from those defined by the applicant, rather than going through the whole list of issues a second time. After the city staff makes their presentation, we'll ask any members of the public who wish to speak to do so. We ask that when you do, if you have desire to speak, you come up to the microphone over there and you start by giving your name and your address for the record. And we would also ask that in respect for the unusual number of people we have here tonight, and we're delighted with that you try to hold your comments to about 5 minutes so that everybody gets a chance to speak. The public comments will be followed by comments by the commissioners. This will be an opportunity for individual commissioners to ask questions, to seek clarifications, to ask members of the public, the applicant, the city staff for questions and clarifications. And it will close with the individual members of the commission making their comments on the application as it exists. We have about 2 hours scheduled for this tonight, and if it goes longer, it'll go longer. But we'll be here to address everybody's concerns. With that, I would ask the applicant to come up and identify himself. Oh, I'm sorry. Check that. I see already. We have to approve minutes. I'm sorry. Just a minute. We have, for those of you who don't know, we have not had a meeting since last August, so we're a little rusty here.
And can I, Mr. Chairperson, have 1 minute after you've approved the minutes before we start?
Absolutely. So the minutes have been sent to us, the minutes for the meeting last August, and I assume everybody's had a chance to review them, so I will ask if there are any clarifications or changes requested by any member of the commission. If not, Can I get a motion to approve?
I move approval of the August 7th, 2013 meeting minutes.
Second?
Any discussion thereof? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Let it be shown that the minutes are approved unanimously. Lucy?
So good evening. I'm Lucy Sloman, Land Development Manager for the Development Services Department. Thank you for that excellent introduction. You covered many of the same points that I had thought I was going to have to do, and I'm delighted I don't. The two pieces of paper, I just wanted to introduce you to the two things that are that you were handed by staff. One is this chart. Many of you received this 2 weeks ago when we did a training. It just summarizes the criteria for review and approval of the two main permits that the Development Commission reviews. And the other chart is our test case. Many of you are familiar with the green sheets, which was an adopted tool and is still in effect if you were reviewing a permit outside Central Issaquah. But since that's an adopted tool, we were trying to find something that provided some similar format but was consistent with Central Issaquah. So this is our first try at that. We thought we would give it to you tonight so you could take notes on it and begin using it, and it'll be an evolving thing as you give us feedback and we see how this works.
Thank you, Lucy. Again, I'd like to remind folks that it's been a while since we've met, and the procedures have changed a little bit, so you'll have to bear with us. We'll try to get through this as efficiently as possible. So, with that said, may I ask the developer and the applicant to start their presentation?
You'll need to speak closer to the microphone.
Better?
I'm not sure.
That's working. I'm representing Lennar Multifamily Communities, and since I assume you're willing to make good on that threat to go longer than 2 hours, I'm going to be really brief. Lennar was formed in the early 50s as a single-family home builder and is building homes all over the country, or has been since that time. About 3 years ago, they branched into multifamily communities, primarily in the east, primarily in the south. We opened an office in Seattle about 1.5 years ago, and we currently have 3 projects, 2 urban infill sites in Seattle and the site that we're going to talk about tonight in Issaquah, all 3 of which are about to move into the construction phase. So it's a pretty exciting time. We're a small office, but we're busy. We're really excited to be here tonight to show you this project. We're very proud of it. We are also very cognizant of the fact that we're very conspicuous by virtue of our location and some of the issues around the property, and as you suggested, Mr. Chair, by the fact that we're the first ones through this process. So we suffered, I think, some of the difficulties of pushing the bow wave, but for the most part, I think I'd like to report to you that it has gone incredibly smoothly, that staff has been responsive and has been full of integrity the whole way through, and we have a very ambitious calendar, and we're really close to it, and I'm really grateful to staff, several of whom are here tonight, that we were able to work together toward that goal. I don't think I really have anything else to say. I'm going to turn it over to Alan Granger from GGLO, but actually I do want to introduce Alan and the rest of his team, Michael Lipko, where's everybody else? John, Brianna, Leslie, I'm so sorry, who have been remarkably responsive. So it's been a joint effort. We're really pleased.
Okay. A little taller than the usual. I think that'll do. My name's Alan Granger. I'm a founding principal of GGLO Architects. We are providing comprehensive design services for this project, from the urban design and site planning, architecture, landscape architecture, and interior design, and have been very pleased to have worked in the city of Issaquah many times in the past, and have a number of projects in the wings, but some of which will probably be coming to you shortly also. So we were faced with a challenge with the Central Issaquah Plan because the process was not defined completely, and yet we were working with an extremely comprehensive document, which was extremely well put together and made it very easy for us to understand the vision and the goals that the city of Issaquah has that they want to have implemented through the Central Issaquah Plan. So what I'm going to go through with my presentation tonight is talk about the site, some of the constraints of the site. I think you all understand that there are some issues associated with this tired retail strip mall development, and then address how we are using those issues to actually shape the development pattern which is going to occur on the property. We're going to tell you how we are meeting the goals and the requirements of the Central Issaquah Plan. And I'll do a summation at the end to let you know that we've sort of hit the key points. What I'm going to do is just layer on top of this site diagram the different constraints that this property has. It is not just your regular block square piece of property. We've got out parcels where the Kentucky Fried Chicken and the auto parts store is on Gilman. And of course the Montessori school is, I'm supposed to be, sorry, I just realized Lucy told me to point where this is. The Montessori school down here. Other than that, we have the longest frontage on 7th Avenue and the second frontage on Northwest Locust. As you may be aware, the site and the retail spaces have had different uses in the past, and those uses have actually left their remnants behind. So there was a former dry cleaner, and that has left a hotspot in that location. There was a former gas station, which has been demolished for quite a long time, but that left a tank on the location of that site. And then where I have unknown there's actually some indication that some of that pollution has drifted from one part of the site to another. Oops, sorry, I'm going the wrong way. You also know that we're fronting on the Issaquah Creek. And although there has been a plan for many years to repair what is actually a breach in the west side of Issaquah Creek, that has never been put into place. And so the low point of that west side of the creek is actually at elevation 65. I'm going to give you these numbers so that you can understand how this is impacting the existing site and then how that's being taken care of in the future development. So you can see that anything that does come over that creek is now entering a site which has basically got an elevation of 64. So it's lower than where floodwater is entering the site. And then the departure of floodwater from this site is going into the culvert and joining the swale, which is sort of the most recognized feature as you're driving along Gilman Boulevard, just northwest of this site, which is the drainage swale, which is running past all of the businesses through there. So that's the route that floodwater leaves this site. Not all of it gets through that pipe because the city's infrastructure is not actually designed for the capacity of the floodwater that's coming out of Issaquah Creek. And so there are times when the floodwater, as you can see, the 65.3 feet is the low point on Gilman, and at times the floodwater does come across Gilman at that point. Sorry, 7th at that point. In addition to that, you probably remember that there is a very deep drainage ditch, and that was once a part of an overall system of drainage ditches put in place throughout the city of Issaquah. But now it is actually recognized as a Class 3 stream and is considered that it has a habitat associated with it. In what's called a 20-year flood, the water comes over. The actual different colors here are sort of giving you some indication of where the depth of water changes. The lightest is the shallowest, and the deepest blue is the deepest water. But that's the existing condition in an overflow for a 20-year flood. So I'm going to start adjacent to Issaquah Creek because we're actually doing a number of things to improve the west edge of where this property meets Issaquah Creek. We're creating both a riparian and buffer enhancement, and I'm zooming in now on a small section of that, and what I want to draw your attention to is that the area outlined in red here is basically a large shelf area where the edge of the creek is being pulled back in. This is doing a number of things, but the primary piece is it's creating new habitat for wildlife along the edge of Issaquah Creek here. This is partly replacing the habitat from the drainage ditch of the Class 4 stream, which is there, but it's also adding some capacity to the storage, the volume of water storage of Issaquah Creek. So the sequence of slides that I'm going to go through are going to actually let you see the kind of things we're doing. I should just mention that a good part of this riparian zone actually has fallen trees which will be put in place. There'll be root balls which are in, yeah, it's recreating the edge of a creek into a more natural setting. But in addition to that, we're adding a whole series of plants which are appropriate to live in those conditions, and plants that are also going to assist with this building of the habitat for the wildlife, both aquatic wildlife and birds. The next piece of the puzzle along the creek is that we're actually restoring the top of the creek wall, of a creek area, so that there is not a low point which was taken out in past years. And so that is building it back up to a 66-foot elevation. And this is, perhaps I can point out through here, this is just slightly higher than the 100-year flood elevation. But when we're looking at these elevations of what the creek gets to in a flood state, the creek water is not a sort of a level amount of water running through. It's moving with some velocity. It's surging at times. And so even with this, water will come over the top of that and enter the site. In this buffer zone, it gets its own planting, but we've also provided a gravel footpath that runs through this area, which is part of the interpretive route, which will actually let people understand what is happening at the different zones on the edge of the creek. So again, we're moving up from the water level of the creek, and we're moving into a different group of plants which are appropriate for this upland buffer enhancement. To follow on from that, what we are doing then, moving west of this area, is that we are providing a park. We're calling it a pocket park. This is actually falling in a larger area here, which is identified as a neighborhood park, but that's a great big lozenge shape which actually stretches, and just the tip of it touches this property. But it still is an area where development could occur, but we're keeping all of the development out of that area. But we're using the shape here to actually start to take any water which comes over the side of a creek and start to move it westbound. This is just looking again at a contour rating. So we were focused in on this area right here, and now you can start to see how the swale that we are creating is actually moving the any floodwater from the east side of a site to the very north west part of the site, which is where it rejoins the city's swale and drainage system, which eventually goes to the lake. So this is just looking a little more closely at how the planting will occur within this area. Sorry. Because there is also a high water table on this site, there are times when the bottom of this swale will actually have water in it at different times of the year, not just in a flood condition, but when there's a higher water table. And so again, we have a different planting which will occur in the different elevations of this swale. And in the very bottom of the swale, we've got plants which will enjoy having their feet wet and will thrive and not suffer because of that. I should say that the top, I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be pointing with this. The top section is actually through the widest part of the swale, and you can see where that is fairly gentle with the slope of the sides. And the other section is cut through here, where we're actually dealing with some structured walls to contain the swale. Again, I'm moving into the second zone, different planting, different exposure to water, and all of these plants are here to create an area which is a wildlife habitat, but it's also an attractive area throughout the year, whether it's rain, sun, or snow. And then as we move further up this, the swale to the sides, we actually can start to introduce seasonal flowering plants, which will line. And you can see the area which is running through the site, which will have those. And then we get to the very top of the swale. And at the top of the swale, we're getting into larger trees, larger shrubs. And it's where the landscape is actually joining into the more structured landscape that you'd expect to find in a more urban site development. This is a very naturalistic feature on this site, and so if anything, it's the one piece of the puzzle here which isn't sort of following the move to the urban character that the Central Issaquah Plan refers to, but it's actually a very park-like part of the site which is running through. And so that's starting to indicate when there is a flood and there is a 2-year event. The the water will only go out across the new shelf where the riparian enhancement was put in. And so that is starting to indicate how that is going to work through that area. In a 10-year event, it is expected that the water will come over, but the water will pretty much be contained throughout this swale and eventually leave the site and start moving down Gilman Boulevard. A 20-year event is there's more water, and you can start to see that it is actually flooding in different other parts of the neighboring sites. And then this is just looking at what the condition is in a 100-year flood with the existing use of the site and the existing buildings that are on the site. And in the future, that 100-year event is going to be contained into the swale. There will still be some flooding which will occur on neighboring properties, but the goal is to get the water back into our new swale so that it can leave the site. So just a visual comparison. You can also start to see that this raises an issue for the character of the development on the site. We are actually providing below-grade parking, but the below-grade parking is at an elevation, and the entrance to those garages is at a point where we are above the floodwaters on the site before any water would enter. No water would be entering the garages. So I'm going to go back to the park for a little while, because the park actually connects into part of the overall green necklace that the city speaks of. We've got several different areas, each with its own character. The area between the new buffer and the swale is actually going to be a naturalized lawn area. This is the kind of slope which will be coming down from areas where people could picnic, but down into the head of the swale. We're actually bringing a footbridge across here, which is part of a shared use trail, which I'll address in a little while as to how that connects into the rest of the city's shared use trails. We are providing a fenced dog run in this area, so that there is an area where there can be some containment of animals, so they're not just running all over the property. Obviously that comes along with responsible looking after picking up the poop and stuff like that. But that's concentrated in that area. And then this is the area where we're actually preserving the majority of the stand of existing trees that are directly east of the Kentucky Fried Chicken and Taco Bell restaurant. And so through this area, those trees running through here are then being enhanced with the new planting. Okay. This is just to give you an idea of the different plant material in the different zones of the park. So there are existing trails around us, but they're not connected. And so the Juniper Trail comes in down here. There is actually a multi-use trail which is running up the west side of 7th Avenue. And then, of course, there is the footbridge that comes across the creek and moves further east towards Gilman Village. So what we're doing with this development is creating a more comprehensive shared use trail system running across this property. We're connecting into this trail. Just to orient you, this is the corner where the Starbucks coffee shop is, and this is the entrance to the retail center here. And so at that point is where we're bringing pedestrians across, and the shared use trail is coming through beside our access drive and then cutting across the bridge that I described earlier through the park, connecting to the second bridge across the creek that's existing, and then we're bringing it down to connect into Fifth Avenue so that we're getting an east-west and a north-south connection into the trail, sort of responding to the necklace notion. One of the things that is not allowing us to follow the exact rules of the Central Issaquah Plan's shared use trail is that down at Fifth Avenue, the shared use route will be coming around, but it's actually going through an area that is used by adjoining properties, although this is within our sort of project site boundary. And so what we're asking for here is an adjustment to the 10-foot wide trail with 2 feet of landscaping on both sides. And we're asking for, in order to not disturb or prevent the users, for instance, of the dentist's office through here, or access coming through for parents delivering children to the Montessori school, we're creating the shared use route as a continuous paved area. But instead of the planting, we're suggesting that the boundary of it is defined through this section by the grass set in the pavers, so that there is an indication to vehicles that this is a shared use space, but the shared use trail typically doesn't include vehicles. The shared use trail is people, pedestrians, and bicycles. But the vehicles are already here, they're already using this property, but we still believe this can be a valid part of the shared use trail running through here. Again, the shared use trail has a requirement for fairly extensive landscaping on both sides of it. And so we're looking at that being a combination of trees, perennials and ground covers as they're running through down both sides. The character of this shared use trail changes throughout the site because in some parts it's actually associated with larger landscaping areas, and so the edges of it get blurred, and then in some places it's actually running through the park where the edges get sort of extended out into the park. Now, in addition to the shared use trail, we're actually building a stronger pedestrian sidewalk connection through the south. Again, we're focusing on this providing a connection both north-south and east-west. And so the new street improvements along 7th Avenue will, of course, include new sidewalks. We'll be connecting into what will be a new sidewalk and treatment here. This is where the new bus stop will be relocated to for passengers. And we're actually introducing a trail following the swale and then crossing another footbridge to come back into the site. In addition to that, we're actually using one of the tools which is recommended in the Central Issaquah Plan, which is a through block passage. When a block gets very large, rather than pedestrians not being allowed to get from one side to the other, there's a trail which is running through here. It is pedestrian only. It is fully accessible, but it is making a connection from Locust Street through the middle of the site and heading up to the bus stop. And then you can see how other sidewalks here are connecting into different parts of the shared use trail. This is just the 4-foot wide gravel path that I was describing, which is part of the opportunity to get closer to the improvements along the side of the creek. And then we are making extensive improvements to Locust, the north side of Locust Street, which includes sidewalk treatment there also. So I'm going to start up at the northwest corner of the site, and then I'm going to move down Gilman, across Locust, and then back into the shed, back into the through block passage. Clearly, with such an extensive stormwater system running through here, we're not able to build the building up to the 0 to 10 foot setback from public streets, which the Central Issaquah plan requires in this mixed use zone. But what we're doing here is we're allowing that area to start to create the new edge to Gilman Boulevard, and I'll tell you a little bit about what some of the issues are through here that are influencing our choices here. Because of the increased traffic, we are installing a new signal at Gilman and 7th Avenue. In addition to the new signal, we're installing turn lanes on Gilman, which will allow signalized turning for people who are arriving at this intersection and going to the north. And then we're actually removing the median through the area east of this intersection in order to create a new turn lane to allow turning movements to come into 7th Avenue and to get to the retail center as well as this development. For those of you familiar with the site, this is one of the existing islands that is there, and then there is another median island which is in this area. It is actually got a row of trees in it, and so we recognize that we're starting, because of the traffic improvements, we're starting to remove some of the trees, and we understand that the population of trees along Gilman Boulevard is part of what gives it its character. And so, well, hold that thought. In addition to the turn lanes, we're actually, Gilman Boulevard is not meeting at the moment the city's own standards for boulevard traffic lanes. And so we're actually moving the curb on the south side of Gilman Boulevard to the, just gonna go. So we're moving that curb a foot to the south in order to provide the appropriate size lanes. The requirement here is that we have two 11-foot travel lanes and a bike lane. What you would normally then get in the city's boulevard requirements is you would get 6 feet of landscaping, and then you'd get a 6-foot sidewalk. Because the Metro buses are being relocated, the Metro likes to stop past the intersection, not before the intersection. And so because the Metro bus is now stopping in this area through here, we're concerned that the new street trees that we're planting through there will not survive adequately in just the 6-foot zone. And so we're providing a wider planting zone to allow the trees to have a greater opportunity to thrive without being whacked by the bus every time the buses are pulling into the bus stop. The buses will, just because of the boulevard section that the city has, the buses will pull into the bike lane in order to drop the passengers off. What we're then doing is that we're, I'm sorry, let me just go back to this one. We're actually adding a second row of trees because of widening the boulevard, because of the buses, because of the trees. we're actually having to remove the existing trees which are on the curb side of the street, but we're also removing a row of hazelnut trees which are running along basically on our property line. So we're replacing that with a second row of trees. So this is creating more of an alley along with trees on both sides of the sidewalk. And you can see that here. I put this up in case you wanted to come back and get into the details of what we're doing with this intersection from a traffic point of view. I'm not going to dwell on it. But the traffic study has been based upon what we would call the worst case scenario. So there's been no credit given, and I just want to draw your attention to this section here. There's been no credit given to, we already know from the 2010 census that 8.5% of residents in the area use transit, that 12.5% use carpools and van pools, and another 10% walk or bicycle. And another 2.5% of the Issaquah people actually work from home. That has not influenced the traffic study nor the requirement for the lane, so the light and the turning lanes. So we've kept with the worst case scenario here. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. And the pieces of the traffic mitigation which are being included is the signalization, frontage improvements along 7th Avenue, new frontage improvements to Gilman Boulevard, and then frontage improvements on Locust. So this is just looking a little more closely. The requirements from Metro are that we create in this location a good size, minimum 8 by 10 area for people to get off the bus. They recognize that some buses have different exits depending on whether we have a single length bus or an articulated bus, or whether there is actually the potential of 2 buses arriving right behind one another. They have requested that we provide up to 50 feet of area where people can actually be stepping out of a bus. We're looking at that being more of a crushed rock area, but the main bus stop being the 8 by 10 requirement that they're looking for. So now in this plan, you can start to see how we're placing the 6-foot wide concrete sidewalk, how our new trees are running through. We are actually hoping to be able to keep a couple of the hazelnut trees, which are healthy. Not all of those trees are healthy, but we're looking to try and keep a couple of those. This is on the food route of fruiting and nut trees. And then we're bringing the sidewalk from the bus stop diagonally across and down to joining the improvements on 7th Avenue. We're proposing to provide a seat wall across here and some a shelter with weather protection and with some trellis. And one of the ideas we've been floating is that potentially the introduction of hops. This used to be a hop farm in the past, and maybe that can be reintroduced as a gesture towards the past uses of this property. As we move down 7th Avenue, you can see that there are fairly extensive improvements which are required under the Central Issaquah Plan. We have one travel lane, we have a bicycle lane, we have a parking lane, we have a planting area, we have a new sidewalk, and then we have additional landscape stepping back to the buildings. What we're showing in our 2 elevations running through here, this is the west facade of the northernmost building. is how the massing of the buildings are actually introducing some three-story elements. It's another pointer in the Issaquah plan, central Issaquah plan, to actually break down the scale of the buildings. And then we're actually using what we've been calling our twisted corners to actually start to identify some of the key ends of the buildings where we're, for instance, down here, identifying where the entrance to Building A is. I do want to point out that we're applying what is currently called healthy living standards to these buildings. And basically that is meaning that we do not just have a front door to these buildings. Every multifamily building that's built also has an egress stair, and very often those egress stairs are internal to the buildings and they don't have natural light, daylight, or air. And what we're doing in all of these buildings is we're actually bringing those stairs to the exterior of the building. They're getting windows, they're getting daylight, and we're actually using those as a secondary entrance for the people who actually want to come into the building and use the stairs or leave the building using the stairs, rather than everyone being focused to elevator use. And so you'll see that in each one of these buildings that I'm talking about, that there's a second access point. I mentioned before that our access drive, which is coming in, running through the site, is actually lining up with the access drive, which is going into the shopping center. And that is where the crosswalk will be bringing the shared use route across that site. The two main public spaces of what we're calling our Building A on the left and our Building B on the right, both of their main lobbies, the leasing space, and amenity spaces are all gathered around this corner. So these are the most public portions of these buildings, and we actually are extending that further back along the shared use trail. So we have an exercise and a yoga studio, and they're fronting on this more publicly used route through the site. I'll come back to it later, but you'll also see that each one of these buildings also has its own courtyard garden spaces for the residents, and some of them are, as in this building, are open to the sidewalks. So you get a view into those. There's just the Juniper Trail and then connecting into the shared use trail. So I was talking about how this new street is being addressed. Basically what you're seeing is from the center line of the street, this is the existing condition, which is on the retail parking side of the street. And so it's a travel lane with planting, with the existing pedestrian route running adjacent to that. What the Central Issaquah plan is asking is that we actually provide a 10-foot travel lane. We're providing the bike lane. We're providing on-street parking. The on-street parking and the bike lane both are traffic calming. Then we're providing 8 feet of landscaping so that we can get a major scale of street trees running along here. We're providing an 8-foot sidewalk along this. This is the core street. This is a core street under the new definition of your street nomenclatures. And so this is sort of the profile of all the pieces that need to fit into the improvement of the core street. So basically it finishes up taking 39 feet of area to be able to do that. Again, similar to what I was talking about of getting significant landscaping on both sides of the sidewalks to enhance the pedestrian environment, the space between the sidewalk and the building is also heavily landscaped. I should have mentioned that whenever you're looking at these, we've got a little key plan in the corner, so if you want to know where you are on the overall site, sorry, I should have said that earlier. There's a key which lets you see where we are. So as we move down, we're actually getting more open space adjacent to the lobbies. So the sitting areas, we are providing a ramp and stairs going into the buildings. Because of the water table, because of the flood water, the parking garages are not sunk completely below grade, but are at a level where they are a foot above the highest flood level that's anticipated on the site to the main residential level. And then the entrance to the garage is also above that flood level. But I think you could see from the previous section, we're actually using the space adjacent to the sidewalk to actually hide the fact that the building is slightly raised out of grade. There is no parking garage which is exposed in any of these buildings. So this is sort of looking at that profile. This is what I was calling a twisted corner. This is the entrance to the lobby space here. And you can see the profile that the landscaping is taking. Directly adjacent to the lobbies on both sides, we've got handicap parking, accessible parking connecting into ramp systems. We've got the required parking for the United States Postal Service's dedicated spot. And we've also got loading areas for people that are moving in and out of these buildings. The materials that were shown in there, and this is actually looking at the three feature colors that we're proposing for the corners on each one of the buildings. But we are also including a brick. We're including some lap siding, cedar siding on this. Sorry, it wasn't lap siding. And then we have cementitious siding, which is being used in both a board and batten pattern, and then a lap siding. So moving down to building B, this is where this corner, which is directly across from Starbucks, is where the main leasing space will be. And so it is at a very prominent corner, and it's got very easy access. It's going to be very transparent to be able to see into this space, and very welcoming. So here, the scale of this changes actually to being a two-story scale of the ground floor here. We've deleted residential units which were above on this level. As we turn the corner and go on to Locust, Locust has been established as a neighborhood street in the definition of the city. These definitions have been defined as we've been working on the project. They weren't necessarily established at the beginning, but we've worked with staff to be able to meet the standards for these core Boulevard Street, Core Street, Neighborhood Street as part of the plan. What we have here then is this is actually requiring a dedication of 15 feet of additional land to meet the requirements of building the streets to these standards. And so the current property line is here, and the new property line will be at the back of the sidewalk. What again you're seeing are our access to buildings, which are through the stairs. This is the beginning of our through block passage, which I'll come back to. We have an entrance to building C through here, and then it continues on to the other end of the access drive, which is coming in from the southeast corner. This is the street entrance to building C. And then this is the character of the neighborhood street as defined, we're actually doing a couple of things slightly differently. In order to be able to get some larger scale trees in this relatively narrow corridor, we're actually creating some bulb outs between parking spaces along the street, so that in those locations we were able to plant a slightly larger tree. So we've got two scales of tree, and they'll form a rhythm going down the street. Going back to the end of the through block passageway on Locust Street, this perhaps was one of our biggest challenges, to make sure that this did become accessible for everybody. And so we actually, we have brought the sidewalk around, following the curb and then ducking back in behind the planting. But we've included a system of ramps to get up into here, as well as providing stairs through in this area, and then used that again to start a larger tree planting. This is the character that we're running through there. The through block passage requires a 10-foot wide path running through here within 20 feet, so there's 5 feet of required landscaping. We're providing a considerably wider passage than that, and the landscaping is actually being included in it's shaping some of the private spaces outside the residences that are on the ground floor. So we have the public space running through the middle, and then some private space. But overall, we're meeting the 10-foot through block passage. We're creating some interest with the planting and defining semi-private spaces. And running down the middle of here from building to building, we have some catenary lighting, which will be just downlight shining in the middle of this route, which will be providing the safety and security. I know you're probably not remembering every plant which has been put up here, but I just want to find out that what we've been, we've got a great landscape team that have been working on this, and what they have been doing is actually looking at variations of plantings. So at each of these areas, which some of them have got different solar exposures, but they each have a slightly different palette of plants. So it's not just the same throughout the whole site. So this is looking at sort of that in more detail, and then the more detailed section as to how the light is working and how we're getting planting. This is above the top of the parking garage, and so all of this planting is on the structure running through here, and that's why you see these planting areas being raised up to get the adequate soil. Now, I mentioned that when I showed you the street entrance for Building C, there was just stairs going into that. We're actually bringing in the accessible entrance to this building from the north, and coming through what is a fairly large courtyard in the middle of this C-shaped building. This is the entrance. It's actually right across the lobby from the entrance from the street. But there is, again, an accessible entrance coming up to a courtyard. The area closest to this is the shared use trail running through here. The area closest to the shared use trail is more of a sitting area for the residents who are living here. We have a slight disagreement with staff here. We're suggesting that one access point to this courtyard is adequate, where staff had raised the question as to whether there may be a second one. We're advocating that we'd rather see more planting than more paving in this area. And that this is a sitting area and landscaping which is more focused with access from the residential courtyard rather than from the shared use trail. We're directly across the street from the pocket park. Building B, courtyard, this is where one of the major amenity spaces as well as the leasing is going to be. And this is, oh, here we go. This is on 7th. And so this is a westerly facing courtyard. And this is our major amenity space in this building. And there's extensive amenity spaces continued outside for more active use by the whole community. And on Building A, the outdoor space is actually on the east side of this building, and this is actually the edge of the building, and we're sort of blurring that to be able to take advantage of all of the new plant material which is occurring in the swale, which is just to the east of here. So I'm just going to cover some of the key points from the Central Issaquah plan. The first is that we're in the mixed use zone here, and the focus of the mixed use zone is to create a mixed use neighborhood. In this area, we have the retail, we have the restaurants, we have offices, and this is the first residential that is being introduced in this portion of this zone. And so we're adding in the three buildings a total of 344 apartments. We have on-site and, as I mentioned, structured below-grade parking. We have been able to meet the city's requirements of not exceeding 60% of that being compact spaces and the rest being full-size spaces. We're providing extensive amenities both on the site for the public and a lot of amenities on the site for the residents, including the landscape courtyards, gathering spaces in the buildings, and exercise studios. I think you got the message, but we're doing extensive street improvements, and that's including the traffic signalization and improvements at Gilman and 7th. We're providing easy pedestrian connections to get to transit. In addition to the bus stop eastbound being located here, we'll be moving the bus stop on the other side of the street so that it is also at the other side of the light. And so for westbound people going into the cities, they'll be catching the bus on the other side of the street. We've also made an effort with the choice of plant material to increase the tree canopy. I think you all know that this is a sort of basically a asphalt parking lot at the moment with very little landscaping associated with it. And so we're increasing the tree canopy here extensively. And then, as I mentioned before, we're developing to the Central Issaquah Plan's new standards of the core street and the neighborhood street. And then the last piece, we love the green necklace piece of the Central Issaquah Plan. And so we're happy to be creating a connection in that overall with our pocket park, with our shared use route across the site, with the through block passage, and then just with the overall standard of the attractive landscaping in the site. That completes my presentation, and I think it's over to Jerry for the staff presentation.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Gary?
That was rather complete, and it's going to be hard to top. Hello, Commission members. I think Katie and Richard, I don't know, but I'm Jerry Lind with the Development Services Office, and I know everybody else. an audience. There is the agenda on the table, and there's also a sign-up list too, so when I'm done speaking to you, you'll have an opportunity to also speak. But if you would please sign the list too, also tonight too. I've taken a lot of names and email addresses from our River and Streams Board meetings we've had in the past, and our neighbors' notices we've given out too. So I've got a pretty good comprehensive list, and if you do want to receive a copy of our final notice of decision, you will want to make sure you're on that list of names too. The application is not only the site development permit, but it's also a shoreline application too. The project is on the western bank of Issaquah Creek, and shoreline management is required for those properties within 200 feet of that ordinary high water mark. Most of the development you've seen tonight is primarily on the western side, but the eastern side has a number of the pedestrian areas too, including notably the park. And so those are the elements that will be under the jurisdiction of shoreline management. You saw the vicinity map, and there was another view of it too, of our major roadways highlighted in yellow on the site within the black area. So it's right in the center of things on Gilman Boulevard. An aerial photo of the site. This site, of course, does wrap around O'Reilly's Auto Parts and the KFC Taco Bell site, which is on Gilman. So those are not included with this. And then you have the dental office and the Montessori school at the southeast corner too. So it's got a rather odd configuration. The yellow lines that you see in the site are the parcels. There's 8 parcels that make up the site, and eventually as it goes through the construction phase, these parcels would be consolidated. An overview of the project, all 3 of them are 5-story buildings, and they're all located above the garages, the parking that we saw. There are some surface stalls, linear one through the site, and then a smaller lot just west of O'Reilly's Auto Parts, and then there's a garbage storage area for pickup in that location as well too. The site is just over 6 acres, and with about 400 parking stalls to serve the needs of the site. The parking count does meet the minimum requirements, and it is well below the maximum too. This is something new that we didn't have under the old plans. Today we do have maximum numbers for parking spaces. For unit counts, we used to see a number of units per acre. Now it's floor area ratio. So these are different elements than what's been shared in the past with the Development Commission. The park and shared use route, those are very key elements of the green necklace plan with the city, and then having interconnecting walkways to the site, which they've provided too. The landscape swale, they'll turn that into not only a functional part of the site, but as an amenity too, worth seeing. Issaquah Creek buffer improvements, quite a bit of that has been done to compensate for the swale that you see along 7th Avenue now, which would be piped. And then, of course, street improvements on the 3 abutting streets. These are some site photos taken recently on a nicer day than today. Viewing southwest, you see on the left, you can see the O'Reilly's Auto Parts with the red horizontal stripes on it, and that's Tiger Mountain in the background. The photo on the right is viewing south. That's 7th Avenue, and you can see the 2 lanes that we have today, and then a lot of grassy areas to the east of the street. And to the right in that photo, that's the Safeway Issaquah Commons shopping center. The applicant mentioned that it's a pretty barren parking lot, and as you can see, it is mostly asphalt. There's some trees in the center of the site. Those trees would be removed. The trees over in the grove by the KFC would be retained. And the final photos I took, again, is viewing south towards Tiger Mountain. Again, it's a lot of asphalt. This is taken from about the street side of Gilman. And then the photo on the right is kind of a messy area. It's right to the west of the Montessori school. And this will be parking and landscape. So you can see in the background behind the deciduous trees, that's Locust Street and some mixed commercial, which is along that street. The site's in the center, and I've taken some views so you can actually see the three streets that are there now. Gilman Boulevard is in the best shape of the three streets, but of course it does not meet the street standards. Will have to be moved the curbing a foot southward to get the street lanes proper, the parking strips and sidewalks. Some of the trees out there have been removed recently, I understand, in this area. It's our edible landscape. The filbert trees, some of them are in bad health, and Parks has taken some out. I'm not sure what the status is of the trees on this site, but again, we want to maintain some of this greenery that's part of our greenway established in the city. 7th Avenue is over on the left, and it's got a little bit of a curvature you can see too. And again, that green strip between the street and the existing store. And then Locust Street, which almost looks alley-like today, would have that 15 feet of dedication. And then the further street improvements on its northern side to meet the standards. Circulation is a key part of it. The heavy lines in the deep red are the major streets. The shared use route actually takes two directions, an east-west direction, which you see here, and then the north-south, which connects from Locust Street up to that little plaza where the footbridge is at Gilman Boulevard. People will want to get a little closer view of Issaquah Creek, and so this is kind of a little minor trail, 4 feet wide of pervious gravel. That'll be the eastern side of the park space. The other buildings and sidewalks have a series of sidewalk connections too, and as the applicant showed, here's the through block connection here that's required when you have blocks that are greater than 300 feet. So this kind of brings it down to more of a human scale. This part here is in the plan, the Central Issaquah plan. You can see the streets and the sidewalks. Primarily, you'll see where you have existing bikeways, proposed bikeways, which is in the dashed purple, unlike the solid purple. And then where you have the green, which is dashed, that's the shared use route, which is the 12-foot wide paved strip with the landscaping on the sides of it too. And you can see the greater picture of the central plan, how this will connect to these other regions of the city as these areas in the future will develop. The idea is to make pedestrians and bicycles more at par with vehicles, and so we really want to push more pedestrian orientation in this plan. These elements that you see here are pushing towards that goal. The shared use route, I took two little snippets from the project drawings that were given. You can see the connection here up by 7th. This is the link that goes across 7th Avenue to the Issaquah Commons Shopping Center. The route does meander. It's got a different pavement pattern than the other walkways and definitely different than the asphalt in the parking lots. The lower one is the shared use route that takes the more north-south direction that heads up to that little footbridge by the creek. And it's a real pleasant spot up there if you haven't been up there. It's really nice. The Central Issaquah plan calls for a number of parks in the valley. These parks are specified to be 2 acres in size. They can be done in pieces, and this site here will not have 2 acres, but it does have a fairly good portion of the park. You can see it extends from Holly Street to the south to the Interstate 90 freeway to the north. The portion of the park by the project is right here. the neighborhood park. Most of the building, or most of the parking, I should say, is contained within the buildings below ground. The buildings are being elevated to be above the 100-year floodplain. And this area here, this pad area, which is the entrance into the two garages, are also built higher than the 100-year floodplain to keep the water from entering those parking areas. There are the two parking lots that are surface spaces, surface lots, I should say. The small one to the north and the meandering one that you see between buildings A and BC. The parking garages in BC are actually connected together underground. The buildings are above those. And generous amounts of landscaping is being placed in the form of islands and peninsulas to break up the appearance of the asphalt within those surface lots. The parking lots that are on the surface do require buffering on the sides. That's a 3-foot wide buffer. Where you have the shared use, or 2 feet I should say, that where you have the shared use route, you'll have the 2-foot buffer, plus you'll have the 3-foot buffer by the parking lot, and you may have a little bit additional too if parking stalls are shortened for an overhang as well too. So you can see how that works to screen the sides. There's a few cuts within the parking areas. They're about 2 feet wide, and this will keep users in those stalls from trampling down the landscaping. But it works nice, and they're done kind of at a regular pattern. You'll see them down here too. That's the overall site plan. Not as colorful as the one we just saw, but again, the existing grove of trees and the park and the dog park, which is right where the grove is located. One time there was going to be a pea patch garden that's been taken out of the plan, but there is a pea patch garden just to the south at the city's new park. So that's encouraging. The drainage swell, which runs through the area, that's a large green space. You can see the buildings A, B, and C, and the courtyards which each building has, as well as the shared court between buildings B and C. Most of the green space is within the park area and along the creek, and again with the swale. So it's definitely is a greening of the site from what you see today. There are the 3 main plazas for each building, and they have the connections to the common spaces on the first floor of those buildings, and then the shared route between buildings B and C that runs northward, connecting to the trails and sidewalks that will connect to Gilman Boulevard. These are enlargements of those courtyards. I think the color looked a little better, but the black and white has the same information that you just saw. So they're fairly active, and they have, it's a mix of both hard spaces and landscaping, soft landscaping. Courtyard building C faces northward. That's what this one here. So it's going to be a little bit more shadier than the other 2 courtyards. So we would ask that some of the trees maybe not be quite as large. Maybe they use lighter colors with the building and pavements and furnishings within this area too, to make it a little bit more pleasant, because it will be a little bit on the dark, shady side the majority of the year, and we want to use these spaces year-round. There were 3 perspective drawings in your packet that you were given, and these are the 3 buildings, as well as the one on the lower right. That's on the cover sheet. And there is a material board. I've got it on this table right here too, and I'll share that with Randy, our chair tonight, and you can distribute it among your members too to see it a little bit closer. But it's got the 3 basic colors on those corners that identifies the buildings. Other elements in the buildings kind of tie it together. This is a map from our Shoreline Master Program. It's a fairly new program that was adopted. And as you can see with the little red star, that's the location of the site. It is a shoreline commercial mixed-use designation, so it does allow mixed use, residential and commercial. The zoning does as well too. The applicant has proposed completely developing the site with residential, with what you see tonight. There is an option for where some units in the future could be taken out to allow commercial. Now, the reason the shoreline is important too is under shoreline management, your building heights are limited to 35 feet in height. These buildings are all beyond the 200-foot mark of the creek, so they are not subject to the same heights as shoreline management, and they are built to the standards allowed by the Central Issaquah Plan. That's our creek. It looks actually better there than it does at other times. There's a lot of non-natives on the left side of this. That's the site for the 7th at Gilman. You've seen the name Cadence tonight too, and that name is changing. I don't know if that was brought up, but it started out as 7th at Gilman, then to Cadence, and it will be changing names again. So you'll see that at our next meeting that comes up in May, and it's not uncommon for names to change a few times before it gets to the building permit stage, and even sometimes to the selling stage or the sold stage. So this area that you see on the left will be restored as part of the creek restoration plan. You've seen a SEPA determination. It's in your packet. And so there's quite a bit of information that talks about what will be required here and 5 years of monitoring of this restored stream area. The next steps after tonight's meeting, we will be taking questions from the Development Commission. You may have some questions about what's been presented tonight. You may have some issues about the conditions or something that you may even want to add to it too. There are 16 conditions in the staff report, and then there's also a number of additional questions which are not really the site development permit, but those that would be handled with the construction. In former days, we combined them together, but we find it's a little bit easier if we separate the conditions in this fashion. These construction conditions, we can still work them out with the applicant as the project evolves. With the SEPA determination, there's also 11 conditions placed on that too. The SEPA review is complete. It's gone through that comment and appeal period, so that part is done. This will be coming back to the Development Commission on the first Wednesday of May. That's May 7th. We will be preparing a briefing response for any questions that come up where we can research a little bit more. And then upon that, there will be findings of fact prepared, and they will be signed by the chair. These findings of fact with the notice decision then would be mailed out, and there will be a 2-week appeal period on that. Copies of that notice of decision will be given to the audience too, if you are on our list as a party of record too. And then once the 2-week appeal period is done, then we will be transmitting the project to the Department of Ecology too. They also have a 21-day on their part, but their appeal period will not start until after our period expires. The applicant would still have the ability to work on those areas outside of shoreline management though, so that would include demolition of the buildings and other site work that would be involved too. Thank you.
Jerry, just one quick question, clarification before we get into it. I know we're not supposed to, but when would you share with the audience when this actually goes to the City Council?
This project does not go to the City Council.
Does not go to
No, the decision makers of this project is the Development Commission.
So, but it used to in the previous system, we would make our recommendations.
No, that's not true either.
I told you this was new, folks.
Yeah, the site development permits have always been approved by the Development Commission.
Right.
In some cases, you had minutes in your packet this morning as we started the meeting for the new Issaquah Middle School. Now, the Issaquah Middle School has a dual application. It has a site development permit, and because it's 15 acres and greater, also has a master site plan to it. Now, master site plans are approved by the city council. And on the middle school, which will be coming up to you in the future, we'll be doing a consolidated review. And for the master site plan, then you will have a recommendation to the city council.
Okay.
And that's the difference between the two.
Right.
If it's just a site development permit and adjustment of standards that comes with it, or a short plat with it, the decision will be solely with the commission.
Okay.
So if you look at that, that's why we put the chart together, because we found that several of our commissions are having a hard time. If you look at the second line down, the DC, where it says DC role, if you look at the second line down, DC role, you can see under site development permit, you're the decision maker, whereas under master site plan permit, you're making a recommendation to council.
Okay.
We found that's hard to keep all those different roles straight.
All right.
I don't think we have too many opportunities for more master site plans in the city. Most of the larger sites have been taken up, and certainly this central Issaquah plan took a lot of that space too. So the Issaquah Middle School may be the last one that comes up even.
Okay. Thank you, Jerry. All right, we're now entering the section of the meeting wherein members of the public who wish to make a comment or to ask questions of anybody, whether it's the applicant, the staff, whatever, may speak. Again, as we've said before, if you'd like to speak, we'd ask you to sign your name on the sheet there, and then step up to the microphone and identify yourself as far as your name and your address. So if there's anybody in the public that would like to make a comment on the record.
Hello, my name is Kay Johnson. I live at 15402 Southeast 46th Way in Bellevue. I'm here as a person of long-time interest in the community of Issaquah. I worked for King County Library System for 30 years, and I was instrumental in the downtown library development and the King County Library Service Center development here at Issaquah. I've also been a vendor at the Gilman Gallery, which is one of the businesses that will be displaced by this development for some 10 years now. My comment, though, was aimed at the project that we have before us here. I thought the landscape was absolutely fabulous. I love all the shared walkways. I think it's going to be such a huge improvement, and people are really going to love it. I wondered, though, about the architecture. I really felt that the buildings looked a little plain, particularly in contrast with such a complex landscaping development. And so I wondered, particularly on the south and west sides, if there was better ways of handling solar screening or some way to make the materials on the outside of the building seem more rich. The other thing that I was thinking of the other night as I was on Interstate 90, these are going to be tall buildings, particularly in comparison to the other buildings on Gilman Boulevard. I thought, well, now what's it going to look like from Interstate 90? And that may be beyond the purview of this particular commission, but I thought, this is what, as a newcomer, I'm going to see as a Issaquah, because most people are on the interstate unless they move south of here. And so I really wondered what kind of impact that would have on people's thoughts about Issaquah. So it was kind of a bigger visioning process that I was thinking about, instead of just looking at, okay, I'm going to live here, I'm going to ride a bus, I'm going to shop at Safeway. I wanted to look at a little bit further back about what the impact would be. Thank you.
Oh, and please print clearly too for us.
She's a librarian.
Good.
My name is Blake Flood. I live at 24213 Southeast 40th Place in Issaquah. You probably didn't want to have a flood for another 100 years, but here I am. And that's really my kind of overreaching concern is this is a site I walk by every day, 5 days a week. I work downtown. I understand what's been done to basically protect the building from water. I've been in the construction industry for 35 years. I have my doubts. I understand there's professionals involved, but I've seen some things. I know from history, I've lived here for 21 years. I've seen the site flood several times. It's typically a gathering of people saying, you know, it's 12 cars and a lot of empty businesses, but it doesn't impact a lot of people. With this building, if the water is a problem, and it will be at some point, you're impacting 300, if there's one person in each apartment, a lot of vehicles, and potentially the city of Issaquah. Where do those people go? So it just seems like it impacts a lot of people if you compare it to what we see now. Second thing is the mixed-use portion. I know kind of from the Issaquah plan, what I've seen, I like the idea that it's true mixed use. There's retail, there's a variety of things. This is very single use, which I understand why. I understand that a retail business is not going to want to be in an area that floods. So it's not going to be like your Lennar development in West Seattle where you have a Whole Foods down below. I understand that. But to me, it's the wrong thing for it's the wrong thing for the site. That's just my personal thing, but I think it needs to be said. The other thing was what the previous lady mentioned, visibility. I think Lennar gets some great visibility. It's the biggest thing you're going to see from I-90. They get great schools. Recently, the tag most livable city. There's a lot of benefits to them. I'm not sure we get the same benefits, no offense. And then I don't know, maybe this question's been asked, I don't know, were there tax credits for this project? None whatsoever? Okay. And that's really all I had to say, so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Any other member of the public that wants to speak?
So my name's Connie Marsh, and I have a store at 1175 Northwest Gilman Boulevard, and also live here in Issaquah. And I think most people's concerns are and continue to be the veracity of the flooding situation. And so one of the things that is interesting is that it will still flood. And so when you bring a bunch of people into apartments where they may not be familiar with the area, they might not even understand, because nobody really reads, that in the middle of the night one night, they might become surrounded by water, and there does not seem to be a street or a sidewalk that would not be covered with water, and so they could be stranded in or out of their apartments for some period of time. And there does not seem to be a code in the city against that. It seems minimally, at least, unwise to me. But the only thing I can do to offset that is ask for some sort of plan, that they would get a package telling them what they're supposed to do when that happens, so that there isn't a panic because they say, well, it's only 6 or 8 inches of water. But in the dark, for example, you don't know how deep it is, and you're always told, well, don't go into flood waters. And if you aren't used to it, I think you need to educate people on that, and also tell them, you know, where they can look up the information to see if a flood is coming, because it's not intuitive. And I didn't see a condition of that sort. We're also right next to Issaquah Creek, and I didn't see anywhere that there would be CCNR requirements for what herbicides, pesticides, or things you could use throughout the area to prevent harm going into the critical areas. I didn't see signage requirements, educating people on the interface with the creek, why it's that way. And I believe in the River and Streams meetings, they seemed reasonably interested in creating some sort of an interpretive structure about the creek. If you're having all of these walkways, it seems like you should also entertain people and teach them about the great area that we live in. And I didn't see any of those. I guess I would call them amenities. They're doing a lot. One of the things they're doing is they're bringing in, if they actually put all those plants in, they're bringing in this amazing palette of plants that someone is actually going to have to know what they're doing in order to keep that amazing palette of native vegetation functioning. And what that is likely to be is don't do anything. Don't try to turn it into a box or a circle like most of the commercial areas that take the native plants and try to make squares. But people don't know that. And so we have some decent examples in town, and that's the new medical center on the north side of the freeway. And the Issaquah Highlands, when they can keep up, actually do a pretty good job. And I don't know how you write a condition to say, if you're going to spend your money on doing this, make it look awesome long term, right? And so you can have fun with that one. The other situation is when it floods, that is very powerful, and it's likely to wipe out a lot of the vegetation that's on the creek. They're going to have a 5-year establishment period for the buffer vegetation. I just want to be sure that that is maintained in perpetuity and would be considered landscaping rather than buffer vegetation, because I think there's the code in our landscape code that says you have to maintain your landscaping in perpetuity.
That is correct.
Okay, so then also in the swale where they're planting all of those plants, when it floods, what's going to happen is all the muck goes into the swale, and then they'll have to clear out the swale because it's flood capacity, and they're going to be clearing out all their little plants with the bobcat. And so that also needs to be considered landscaping because, well, the plants would probably love the muck. The capacity doesn't like the muck, and so that would be, I think that needs to be clear that needs to happen long term. And let's see. Oh, so much of the Central Issaquah plan was about the peekaboo views of the Alps. And I didn't see, when I just went through the language again, I don't see where in our guidelines we say, okay, have we checked all of the courtyards? Have we checked how we're angling the separations between the buildings or the trails to get the views of the mountains that we're trying to protect? Because, you know, Jerry was showing us tiger. I saw squawk. I saw all kinds of places. So I think that needs to be considered here, and then try to figure out how we put that into the plan altogether. The restrictions. Okay, I think that's all that I have here. I would like to say I agree that you got a lot of vegetation, and then you have these very stern-looking buildings. And I think a lot of it is there's no variation at all in the roof lines, and that seems awkward. It's very severe up here, and then you got all this going on down here. It seems like a little bit of moderation. And the color palette, caution. And can we have some like bears peeking out underneath benches or something to amuse us in a silly way as we go around? Thanks.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? All right, we will now come to the, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry
for my tardiness. Good evening, members of the Commission. My name is Matthew Bott, and I'm here as a citizen as well as representing the Greater Issaquah Chamber of Commerce. And I just wanted to offer our general support and excitement about this plan, something I've become a little more familiar with in the past few weeks. And I understand it's the first under the Central Issaquah plan, or one of the first, obviously, so certainly has precedence and something that is important from that perspective. And so adding to the momentum of the redevelopment goals of the plan and of the community. So I think that's important. I think it goes without saying, but this plan represents substantial improvement to this parcel along one of the major thoroughfares of the community. The trails, the plazas, the space that's created there, I think is pretty special. I really appreciate the safety issues along that are addressed in terms of the light, the median changes. I know we've had members of our staff that have had accidents in that area, and that's just a trouble spot in the community. So addressing that through the median changes and the light are pretty important, and I think I appreciate the applicant's attention to that. I'm also privileged to serve on the Economic Vitality Commission, a peer commission to this commission, and I know we spend a lot of time looking at workforce housing issues, which are pretty severe, as you know, and getting housing of this nature at this price point on the valley floor is pretty important, both to the large businesses in town and to the small businesses. The chamber is an employer of 8 individuals, and we suffer from that in trying to find folks with who can afford to live here. So housing at this price point, I think, makes a lot of sense from that perspective. Whether you're talking to the business community or human service agencies, they'll say, this is the right thing to do long-term for economic sustainability and to support folks who can live and work in the same community. So that's important. And then just in a little esoteric piece, this really is a project among many other projects that will support job creation in our community. And I can tell you that the businesses in I think it's the Issaquah Commons that are sort of next door, they're really excited about this, obviously. Those are all retail businesses, and this is new customers for them. So just overall, we're real supportive of it. We appreciate your attention to this and the work of the applicant in trying to address the needs of the community and the goals and the thoughts. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sir? Matthew, would you sign, if you didn't, sign that, please? Go ahead.
Hi there. My name is Ethan Sherrard, and I'm a resident of Bellevue. I live at 5027 159th Place Southeast. I've been working at the Antiques Mall on the site for about 2 years now, and I'm also going to school at the University of Washington. I'm studying mechanical engineering. I think the project is very, very exciting. I like the green spaces. I like the shared use pathways. I like the courtyards. I think there's been a lot of consideration put into amenities that are going to be available to both the residents and to the public. I just wanted to present one concern I had about earthquake safety. I've read the geotechnical feasibility evaluation that Lennar got from Pangeo Incorporated, which made some recommendations about what kind of foundation should be built with the building. And in that feasibility evaluation, the soil there was a number of boreholes done to discover the various layers present in the soil. And in that evaluation, the soil was ruled likely not to liquefy in an earthquake at a depth of, at a depth of less than 23 feet. So there is soil likely to liquefy, but not above 23 feet is what this evaluation said. And my concern is simply that I've spoken with a dealer who was present on the site, multiple dealers who were present on the site in the 2001 earthquake, and there were a lot of undulations and ripples going on at the surface of the parking lot. So I doubt that the liquefaction is limited to depths of greater than 23 feet. And if that's the case, then the simple floating foundation that they plan might tilt and present a greater deformation than this geotechnical feasibility evaluation allows for. And my only concern is that perhaps a different kind of foundation might be better, one that sends pilings down to firmer soil or uses packed rocks in ways that the geotechnical feasibility evaluation actually recommends. The floating foundation was the lowest recommended foundation in this report. So I have a short letter. I'd just like to be able to leave it with the council. I have 5 copies of it. And Oh, I have one question before I finish for Jerry.
Thanks.
And Jerry, my question for you was, you said that there might be opportunities to replace some of the units with retail spaces in the future?
That is possible, yes.
And what, would that be just some of the ground floor
That would be
units?
some of the ground floor units.
And
Go-
then the
go
retail
towards 7th.
would have access from the parking spaces that are on the property or parking spaces that are on 7th?
Well, if it's retail, they could use those parking stalls on 7th.
Okay,
They get full credit for it.
all right. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I'm just talking here. I don't do these things. I'm really shy. Okay, I'm Darlene Cohen. I don't know where I reside. I guess I reside at 625 Northwest Gilman Boulevard because I'm there about 12 hours every day. I own Gilman Gallery. And as Tom knows, and he's been very darling and very sweet and extremely supportive. No, you have. There's no retail space in Issaquah. You're going to be losing the business that's the only business in this town that wins awards. King 5, 425 magazine. I could go on and I could name them. We are named in the Seattle magazines as one of the 5 destinations to go outside of Seattle for the tourist. And you're going to lose us. There's no retail. When you have no retail, you also have no employment. And though I love what they're doing, I wish that they were supplying jobs. Because in America, our biggest problem is unemployment. So this is a mixed use. Even when they put a contract on this, and you know what Gilman Square looked like, it was full. Except for one area where the electrical boxes are, they left that little teeny space where its sisters used to be in because they needed access to the electrical, the main panels. And Gilman has been here for what, almost 30 years? We're a destination. I can't tell you how many people from out of state even come into our mall. Just not on a monthly basis, but on a daily basis. Let alone, I don't think you guys, I mean, there's a lot of you in here that shop in my mall, and I see you practically 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, you know, I just can't tell you that this town needs retail. It needs to supply jobs for those people who are going to be living in buildings that you're building. Where are they going to work if you do not supply jobs to them? That's all I've got to say. Oh, by the way, Gilman's going to be leaving Issaquah because there's no space. There's no retail space for us.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sandy Marshall, and I'm a resident of Sammamish, and I'm one of the 100 small businesses currently in Gilman Square that will be looking for a new place to do business. I'd like that to be Issaquah, but we're getting less commercial space now instead of more. One concern that I have is just being someone who parks and drives in Issaquah almost daily, and because of Gilman Square, it brings me to Issaquah from the plateau. I may change. I may start going to the Highlands. I may start going to Redmond as where I do my banking, my post office, my shopping, my grocery shopping, because again, there's going to be less retail for me and my place of business. But one concern, because I drive Gilman Boulevard every day, is I look at the parking and I see the 400 parking spaces. And when I do the math of 344 units, and I'm going to say, I'm not sure, but I'm going to say 1.5 cars per unit between 1 and 2 bedroom, and a lot of times at this price point in apartments, there's 2 people sharing apartments and splitting the rent. I get 516, and I see 400 spaces, including underground and outside. If anyone tries to park on the street in Issaquah, I'm not sure where 100 more cars are going to go. So it seems like there may need to be some provision for this. If there is an impact, that there needs to be a condition
because this complex would be putting those 100 cars, I don't know where. And so I think that's just something for the commission to think about. Thank you.
Is there anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Suzanne Suter. I live at 133 140th Place Northeast in Bellevue. And I do have a picture that I would like to share with you, if it's possible. Perhaps, Jerry, if I could share. I only made 3 of them. But
Okay, that'd be fine. Can you move it around the document? Can we keep these pictures? Do you want them back?
have them. Yes, you can have them. You can see they're just pictures. Having moved to Issaquah in 1964, I've seen a lot of changes, and although I don't live in Issaquah anymore, but have certainly spent most of my adult life here and working here as well, the redevelopment of this Gilman Square, I think, is long overdue. I remember being absolutely thrilled when the Hilo Shopping Center was built, when before it was just a cow pasture. And Georgie Porgy Bakery, some of you are way too young to remember all of those things, but it was very exciting because when I moved here in '64, we didn't have a shopping mall. We had to go to Bellevue. So having taken a long, hard look at this property in its present condition, which I think has been less than desirable for a number of years, and having witnessed the floods, even seeing pictures in the paper with one of the floods with a rowboat out in the middle of the parking lot, people sitting in a rowboat that was able to float. That's how deep it was. I believe this property deserves the time and innovation to create a silk purse out of a sow's ear. An opportunity not to be missed. When you step back and take a real serious look at all of the structures along Gilman Boulevard, which when I moved here it was Highway 10, and when we created this boulevard, a lot of the architecture has not really been indicative of a boulevard. So I think that this prime piece of property, although if life was perfect, I must say that the auto parts store and the drive-in, I wish that they'd be moved so that it could be a total open space. Because looking back at it through the lens of that particular picture, with the Issaquah Alps, with Squawk Mountain in the background, and setting it back as the architects have designed, I think is highly desirable. The thing that I agree with many of the remarks that have been made is the scale and the scope of the buildings themselves. I think that in view of all of this emphasis on the landscape, which is extraordinary, almost building a forest out there, and the pathways are remarkable to build the links that we all cherish with the park, with the walkways and pathways along our stream, and connecting all the dots throughout our community from the lake to the hatchery and so on. But I do think that a hard look needs to be looked at this architecture, because I think it's very uninteresting in comparison to all the emphasis on the on the landscape itself. So I'm thrilled with the fact that something hopefully marvelous will come of it, and I look to all of you to making marvelous decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. If there are no further public comments, we will now turn to the commission, and I'm going to do things a little differently in keeping with the tone of the evening. I'm just going to make an observation. I alluded at the beginning of the meeting to the fact that there is an unusual confluence of events that's going on right now in Issaquah. We all know that the economy has affected Issaquah as it has every other part of the country, and the fact that we haven't met since August, and August was the first meeting in about maybe a year, is indicative of the change of pace for us here. That's changing. We all know the economy is getting better, and it just so happens, and this is the point of my observation, not a comment, I hope, is that the residents of Issaquah right now are faced with a real great opportunity. And that opportunity is to evaluate two different approaches to growth. As we speak, there is a proposal to take 49 acres of forest and cut it down and build about 350 residential units at the periphery of the city limits. And then there is this project, which proposes to take about 7 acres that is already asphalt covered and put about 344 units in it. I would suggest that this is a textbook example of different approaches to growth and to development. And it's a real good opportunity for us to individually look at it and make some decisions about what we think is best for the future of Issaquah. So with that, I will turn it over to Commissioner Morgan.
Oh.
Commissioner Morgan.
Make sure I have this on. And I'll just, I guess, go through some questions, Jerry, and they may seem random. I guess first question is on the 2 driveways from Gilman with the relocation of the driveway. It looks like we're going to have 2 driveways that'll be about 60 feet apart, the existing one into the KFC and the
There
new
is one
is?
between the KFC and O'Reilly's too. You're right.
Yeah.
Until that site gets redeveloped.
I guess I was wondering about, are we going to have, would we be able to pull up the site plan so we can look at this? I guess my concern is when I first saw that, I wondered about,
You want an existing plan?
well, or the new one showing, so I guess that one, so that new driveway.
That's the
and
driveway, the new
there,
driveway that's
and the
being
driveway there.
moved eastward.
Right, so we're gonna have 3 driveways within maybe 120 feet or so?
You will, yes.
Is that
not-
traffic engineering?
It's not the
Consider
best
that? Would it be a
solution
problem?
for us. I guess we would prefer to see if we could eliminate that one between the KFC.
Would it,
But it's not part of the project, it's off-site.
well, there is spacing, but would it be all right if the applicant spoke? Because I think they have more familiarity with some of the requirements they're facing in terms of driveways.
Yeah, it's
And that property owner?
Oh, sure, I'm happy with that, but also it always seems to me in the past we've heard the city raising concern about distance between driveways, and I don't know, maybe this is acceptable, but I'd love to hear.
There actually has been quite a bit of discussion about this between ourselves and the staff, and we all recognize that this is not the most ideal situation. What is sort of behind part of the traffic arrangement here is that there are some unusual easements and requirements placed on the property that Lennar is developing by the adjacent property owner. And for instance, this is the property line, but providing access around this site in order to service that property was written into the legal agreement between the owners at a time in the past. In addition to that, the reason why we have this bridge across the swale here is because there is a cross-property easement which is required to allow this property to have access to this property. Clearly, when it was all surface parking retail, there was reasons, behind all of these. And then, in addition to that, there is a driveway here which actually has an easement which is running across the area of the property where we're not developing and that is actually falling within the shoreline area. So having said that, we are making the first step towards improving the traffic access to these sites. The existing driveway is actually coming through here and sweeps around and comes into the property like this. With the requirement to have the signalized intersection, that driveway has to be relocated. It is too close, it's actually too close to the 7th and Gilman intersection, and it actually creates, it is where the current break is in the median, and is actually responsible for a dangerous cross boulevard access point at that place. So that danger and the issues relative to the intersection are being resolved by moving this current driveway, which comes here, to this point right here, where it is a right in and right out only.
So all three of those will be right in, right out?
Yes.
When they're done?
And yes, in the future, if this parcel is developed, there will clearly be a different access relationship onto Gilman. But we have to take the first step towards solving the bigger problem because of the improvement to the intersection at 7th and Gilman, which starts to have the ripple effect down. But we also then have these legal requirements to provide access to that property owner of the
Right.
neighboring property. Sorry it's so complicated.
No, that's
but
okay,
it's-
that's okay, that's great, thank you. But since I have you up there,
Oh,
I'll,
okay.
if you don't mind, I'll jump in. The parking garages are at 60 feet, so that's below the 100-year floodplain, I take it?
The lowest level of the parking garages.
Lowest
Yes,
level.
the parking garages are actually being designed as complete bathtubs.
Will
they're-
are there ways for them to flood, though?
No, that's why the entrance to the garages here and here are both at an elevation above the level of the 100-year flood.
So given that sometimes
when
I've
you
heard water goes over the 100-year flood, if water gets in there, how does it drain out? Or is it
Well,
pumped out?
If we're at that point in time, the water is more likely to be crossing 7th than it is to be entering the garages.
Okay,
You
7th is the
remember I
lower
told you the
level.
low point on 7th was 65.
Great.
So that's sort of how the whole garage entries have been designed so that we do
Above
not
7.
have access of water going into the garage.
Great, thank you. And I guess another question, yeah, sure. I guess a question on the shared use route with the vehicles at the southeast
Yes.
corner. Any other, I guess, Wooner ideas other than just Grasscrete?
Well, what we're trying to do there is actually just indicate, it's almost like a rumble strip. We're trying to create some texture which includes some plant material that lets people know who are parking here on the adjacent property that they're going across that. We, the people in the Montessori school and the users of the dental office building, they have been using this space for access for many years. And so Lennar is attempting to accommodate their use of this property, but satisfy the city's goals that pedestrians, bicyclists will also be coming through the same space. So
Okay,
it's-
which I think is great, and I just wondered if there's anything more, I don't know, anything more than just, again, sort of Grasscrete that And I don't know, I'm not an architect, so.
Um,
But I understand what you're doing, and I wondered if there's something
we'll
better.
we'll keep our thinking caps
Yeah,
on.
great, thank you. Question on the second connection to the shared use route, and this would be a question, Mr. Granger, yeah. The second connection to the shared use route from the Building C courtyard,
Yes.
and I can understand your desire to maintain a, sort of that central area for those residents. But when I look at that, and I couldn't tell from looking at the landscaping plan, it just said that it was planting material that surrounded that. And I wondered if I came out of Building C and I wanted to go to that shared use route and I wanted to go to the right, I thought, would I just walk along that path and then cross through the landscaping straight to the trail?
I don't know you well enough to answer that question.
That's right. But I
yes,
wondered,
you may. Yes,
is the planting material designed to keep people from doing that, or?
The idea of the planting there, and when we're just looking at the plan, we're not actually seeing what our landscape architects have tried to do in 3 dimensions. We have sort of tried to berm up around there. Jerry mentioned that this is a north-facing courtyard, and what we've been trying to do is to get a sitting area that the residents can use as far to the north as possible without it feeling like the residents go out to read a book in the sun and that they're sitting on the shared use trail. So we were trying to create some separation both with the grading of slight berming and the berming associated with planting to create an area where the 2 uses could happen very close to one another.
Great.
We think they're maybe 40 or 50 feet apart, and yes, people might do exactly what you described.
No, but I won't walk over a hill, so I won't go through it, so that's great. Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chair, I think that's all I've got for right now. Thank you.
Commissioner Sella?
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the presentation. I think it was really, really good. And I really liked the pictorial demonstration or explanation of the water flow at 100 years of existing condition and the future condition. That was really, really helpful. But obviously, water is a big concern for people, and so I think you've done a good job addressing that. I get the two areas that I just had interest in while I was looking through the plans was the courtyards and a 5-story building on a covering over an east aspect of the courtyards, at least in Building A and probably Building C, are going to make planting pretty problematic of getting enough sunlight in there to make it feel pretty decent. That's my own guess. So I hope you're paying attention to that. And I also shared a 5-story building along 7th Street is going to be pretty stark. And I think that the color palette that you used was intriguing, but I guess I have to confess I'm an engineer, and so it doesn't take much to intrigue me. I think that the notion of thinking maybe of modifying a roof line or doing some other architectural things to really enhance the interest. When you look at the Central Issaquah plan, and the intent of the building design is to establish a design standard that creates a vibrant, pedestrian-friendly built environment, and I don't know that I felt very vibrant. So that's it.
Can I jump in, Mr. Chair? Are we presume we're going to come back through for comments? Are we just in the question period now?
I actually think that this is a consolidated, my understanding is that this is a consolidated comment, question and comment, and that we might do it the way we did it before. We ask the questions first and then do the comments. But yeah, I would say that if you do have comments, Commissioner Morgan, go ahead and you should make them now.
I'll wait.
Okay.
Been talking a long.
All right. Commissioner Brand?
Commissioner Morgan wants to play the old school approach, and we will challenge ourselves to blend them together. So first, I do appreciate the materials that were presented to us and
presentation by the applicant team and staff. I think that was very informative, and it answered some of my questions in the presentation, but I do have a couple. First, flooding, obviously, and the challenges offered on this site are of concern to the public that has addressed the commission tonight, and also just as we were reading through the material and heard it. One of the questions about the flooding, and I don't know that I fully understood this, but so we're going to raise the level of the buildings to take them above the 100-year, 1 foot above the 100-year floodplain. But to do that, we're putting material in the flood zone, and so is there compensatory storage that was created for that offset that happens, or are we pushing the floodwaters now when we do have a flood condition, out and across 7th Street? And I think that's a concern that I saw in some of the public comments, and I was just concerned about how that particular issue is being addressed, and from a flood condition, are we moving it to a different location, or are we adequately creating compensatory storage space on this site in the regrading that's happening? Great.
You're welcome. All right, would you just repeat your name just for the record, please, everybody? Thank you.
With Lennar. The compensatory storage was actually created when some work was done, I believe in the late 90s, on Issaquah Creek that involved taking some of this property. And so in an agreement between the city and the previous property owner, the compensatory storage was prospective in that sense. So there is the ability of this property owner to fill up to, I think it's 610 CFS of volume, and I think we're filling 380. So we're actually leaving more storage than there was previously.
Great.
Make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you. That helps. I missed that in the staff report. Sorry.
You'll find that information actually within the SEPA determination too.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it talks about, because of the floods we had back in 1996, it was really severe, and the channel there, it was widened and improved, and to compensate for that, they were allowed to do this.
I will admit I did not confess that I did not read the SEPA determination. I'm sorry. Okay, another question. The shared use trail near the dentist's office, looks like we had, one of the constraints is that there's parking, it looks like it's on this site, that is provided for the dentist's office. Am I reading the plan right?
Yes.
Okay, and that's...
The parking itself is actually off-site, but just to the edge, although I think you could see that some of the cars actually are going to extend over onto our property. The access to the parking is on our property. And it's our belief that first of all, I think there's a good neighbor policy going on here. I think we want to try to continue to provide access to this business owner. We want to try to continue to create a safe circulation system for the Montessori. I think it's also fair to say that the dentist probably has a prescriptive easement, just from having used it for 30 years.
Okay. So we are then constrained and have to get creative with, as Commissioner Morgan was talking about, how we differentiate this particular space and create a safe environment for what would be a...
So it's a shared use and then some.
Yes, with vehicles, so that I understand. This is relatively straightforward, I think. I heard you mention that as part of the agreement with Metro on the bus stop, that you're providing a concrete slab for getting on or off the bus, and then the rest of the 50 or 60 feet is gravel or crushed rock. And I was curious about why crushed rock, and is that the right material there? Over time, does that just make a mess, get kicked around? Is there another option to do some other material that's more stable in that location, or is that a requirement that they give you?
Of the plan? Is this one?
No, it's probably Adobe, the red one on the top.
My name is Michael Lipko. I'm landscape architect with GGLO, working for Lennar on this project. the question about using the gravel pavement, our belief was that it would be nice to be able to continue the boulevard of street trees instead of interrupting them with concrete pavement or putting trees in tree grills or grates within that space. We thought the health of the trees would do better coming up through compacted gravel versus concrete.
So the thing that, and this is the first time we've seen it, and it's kind of a construction level detail, but I think it's a good conversation to have. We don't actually allow gravel that close to right-of-way because of city maintenance issues. So it's just it's a material detail we will have to work through.
Okay.
There's always an issue about gravel hitting cars and windows and dings too.
Yeah, so I just flag that as an area of interest, and I think probably a fairly simple thing to solve. So this is the courtyard. A couple of questions were recorded, or maybe comments related to the courtyard. Courtyard C, again, this is a question for staff. Are the courtyards for the purpose of public use, or are they inward facing to the project for the residents' use, or is there a combination? Does the code specify one or the other?
So the Central Issaquah plan has a combination of community spaces, some that are intended for the public and some that are primarily focused to residents, although there wouldn't be any reason that they couldn't choose to make them more public. They're not required to be more public.
And there's no specific area required one over the other as far as the public versus the private?
There are some size requirements, and the proposal meets the requirements in the code.
The reason I'm asking the question is the configuration of Courtyard C with kind of one way in and one way out is, it wouldn't be inviting for people on the mixed use trail to come in because they would feel like they're going into somebody's private space because it's leading to an entrance to the building and it's private. If the idea is to invite people into the space, then obviously you want to open it up a bit and have a circular walk that would walk through there so people could go in, sit down, take respite from the trail if they want to, and relax for a minute. If that's not the requirement, then I think, and it is more for private use, then I think the one way in, one way out would be the way to go. I mean, maintain more privacy in that route. So that's just an observation on that one. And I shared the observation about the shading that these buildings are going to create, and particularly with the, in my observation at least, with the through block crossing, that's going to be not, in my observation, getting a lot of sun, so it's going to be necessary to be, deliberate in how you provide lighting. I know you're going to use catenary lighting, et cetera, in there in the vegetation, but that over time that can become a very dark, mossy space. So I think that was just, and I don't know just based on the configuration of these buildings whether you can solve that problem, but that is something they need to be mindful of, I think. And another question for staff, the retail, this project is not proposing retail at this point. The land use code of the zoning allows for retail in this building.
It does.
But it doesn't require it.
It does not require, no.
It seems, and I understand that you've got to have enough population, et cetera, to support it, even neighborhood retail. 300 plus units obviously provides a significant new population there. But I think, I guess one concern is and we've heard it from the speakers, from the public this evening about the loss of retail space. Over time, I think that with the plan, we're going to see more retail space because it'll be supported by the density of population growth. But we're kind of in this transition period, which is difficult. And you're going to have, you create retail space now, it doesn't work, it sits vacant. And so then you've got kind of dead space or shuttered building. But I think we need to think about how we accommodate that transition into the future and think about that in the building design. You can't just flip a unit and turn it into a retail space. You got to think about that in advance and try to accommodate that. And I don't know if that's something we can do as a requirement or just something we should think about, because I think in the future that will probably work on this site, but I can understand why now it may not. And those are the only questions I have. I guess my comments, a few things that I really liked about this project, and you've heard from others. I really appreciated the work that you did in creating the on-site, the integration of the trails, kind of isolation of the parking areas. You move that back to the center of the site, away from the streets, and move the buildings to the streets. A little concerned about the issue related to the Gilman, the frontage on Gilman, and the lack of a building face on Gilman, which was anticipated, I think, in the plan. And I noticed in the conditions, we've got a condition that is to try to create a feature out there. But I think that's going to be a hard one. I think you're going to have to try to make sure it's interesting to people who are walking along Gilman Boulevard. But at the same time, the idea is it's not an urban face that we're creating. It's more of a park face. And not a bad thing, but it's not what the plan really anticipated. So I think maybe some architectural features, as you noted, at the intersection, and anything else we can do along there, even an art, introduce art, maybe the city could help with that, to create a more urban condition, I think, along that frontage would be helpful.
Did you look at the photograph examples we gave in the staff report? Do you have any thoughts about some of those examples that we showed?
I looked at them. I can't say that I had any thoughts about it. Hang on, I'll give them to you on the fly here.
And you don't have to be put on the spot.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have thoughts, we would love to hear them, but you don't.
I think whatever it is, it needs to reflect the urban character that we're trying to create. Just a simple light gauge, like the wrought iron fence, for example. That doesn't generally work for me. Something that's more significant, like the upper right corner with kind of an awning and some major elements that might be overkill in this case. But those sorts of features that are a little bit more in an urban scale condition, I think, will be good. And again, since this is a catalyst project, the first one out, it's going to feel really awkward for a while. But over time, we've got to think ahead here and make sure we're designing a building and constructing a building that's going to fit in the long term, because it's going to set the framework for what comes next. So I think we've got to make sure we're thinking about that.
And is it, if you don't mind me jumping in, is it possible too that they could incorporate signage into that 60 feet of?
Are you talking about monument type signage? We are trying to discourage monument signs out there.
No, but I was saying they've got to create 60 feet of streetscape, or I don't know what we call it, a street wall.
Right, that'd be the minimum. Yes.
A minimum. Can the signage be incorporated into that street wall?
We've begun talking with the applicant about that, and we see some real nice opportunities, just because since the building is set back, that would be a logical place for a sign to be if there was a building. So.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm almost finished. I really appreciate what you've done with the street frontage improvements, particularly around on Locust Street. I think that's going to transform that street. I mean, I think, Jerry, you called it an alley. I think it's going to be much more than that when we're finished. And again, it sets the kind of the new framework for what comes next along that street. And I particularly appreciate the creative solution you've got for the elevation change, getting into the through-block connection with the ramps and the stairs integrated. I think that looked interesting and integrated, and not looking like it was just added as you've got to do it and just figure out a way to build a ramp in there. You actually built it into the transition there with the sidewalk going out into the street. I thought that was well done and appreciated that. The building design, comments on the building design. I also, it's interesting what you've done with modulating the building and pulling out pieces on the 2- and 3-story level, trying to make it a little more pedestrian, interest in the pedestrian level, a little more at pedestrian scale. The top of the building is, I tend to agree with everybody else, it's just, it doesn't have any interest in it. And if there's something we can do to create more relief, more attraction to the building, particularly at the top, but even some additional relief, if there's some architectural features we could add to that, I think it would help. The colors are going to be pretty bold. So again, this one's going to be fairly striking, I think, in the color palette that's been selected. So I think we need to be cautious with how much of the bright color we introduce here, but at the same time, it does create part of the architectural interest that you're trying to create. I understand that. So again, architecture is kind of like art, you know, people all have different opinions about what they like and what they don't like. But I do think this is a lot of building and a lot of flat roof, top building to not have some sort of relief that happens for the eye at the top. And then I guess my final comment is, again, I think this is a catalyst project for the Central Issaquah Plan. It's the starter, and I think it's going to be looked at, and people will provide all kinds of comments about how they love it, how they may not like it so much, what we could have done better, and that's just part of this process. But I do appreciate the work that's gone and the risk that you're taking to actually advance a fairly significant element, and I'm looking forward to seeing this thing move on through the process and head into construction. So thanks for the work.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Karras?
Oh, I don't think my mic worked. So I will just start with some comments, and then I have some questions. I think this is a great project. I think Issaquah is really lucky to have you guys, Lennar and GGLO, working on this first CIP project, and I think it's great. I think it's very creative and attractive. I like the creativity with the landscaping. I was interested in the idea of having some kind of visual simulation from I-90, and going along with that, I think it's important for everybody to realize, as has been brought up before, that this is the first project. So even if from I-90 we're going to be seeing this big building that pops out at us, it's important to think about 20 years down the road when this Gilman area of the CIP is more developed, and so this building, how is this building going to fit in with the rest of it? So it's important to think about not just the next 5 years, but the next 20 when you're looking from further distances back. I like the idea of interpretive signage, especially in relation to the historical elements that you brought up, like having cops on the site. I think that's a cool idea, and people might not know what it's all about if there's not some historical information there. So I think that's a good idea that Connie brought up. I like the features on the building that break up the scale. I like the bright colors, and I know that's just my opinion. And I love that you're increasing the tree canopy. I love all the variety of plants and trees and heights and grasses. And I just have a few questions, and these I know are not maybe the most pressing issues about the project, but they're some that that I thought about. I noticed, I just quickly looked at the SEPA review, and I know I saw 344 units and 346 units. Wonder if you looked at the total increase in population. I know they're mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units. So how many more people in total? So I'm thinking like 800 or 600. I'm not sure if you looked at that. And being a parent with school-age children and the elementary school just a couple blocks away, I know that I have heard from parents at our school, you know, they are just wondering about it. And I know with the size of the unit, there might not be very many elementary age or middle or high school age students, but just something that, again, probably not the most important issue, but something that might need to just be stated somewhere. Let's see. There's been some discussion about the Montessori, which is great. I know that they have and it sounds like you've worked closely with them, so you probably already know this, but I just wanted to bring up quickly that they have a student drop-off, so you know that, okay. So the cars come in and they sit in line for a while, probably right on top of the planned shared use path. So I just wanted to bring that up, and it sounds like you're working with that.
We thought it was important actually to allow them, however they stack, to continue to look at, sorry.
So they kind of, I think, as I remember, we used to come in and turn into that dead-end area and do a loop and then drop our student off at the fence there.
Right.
So I'm just
what we thought was
envisioning like
important in terms of-
cyclists starting to go through and, you know.
It's obviously going to be a conflict, but we thought it was more important to allow for that loop that you described rather than have parents pull in, back up, and then pull out again with kids in the parking lot. So we just thought it was better to maintain it the way it is now, which is obviously
Great.
working, notwithstanding the potential conflict of.
And then maybe some, yeah, I don't know if it's going to be, it probably wouldn't be the type of trail that would have a lot of fast cycling going on. But if it is, then some
I suppose it's
signage or
possible, and
something
a
like
sign would
that.
probably be a good idea.
Or some kind of barrier so that they slow down or something.
Oh, and Katie, you may see that there is a discrepancy in the number of units too with what you read in the SEPA determination versus the staff report. And the number of dwelling units, it has fluctuated as this project has evolved too. And so, you know, it's possible the number may change again too, depending on the size of the units too.
Oh, okay. Like number of bedrooms?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Let's see. I appreciated hearing about the contamination from the historic uses on the property, the dry cleaners and the gas station. And I'm assuming that's all contained underground. And I was wondering if there would be any conflict with that as you're building the swale, because you'll have to dig underneath.
Right. No, we're not just going to cap it over. We're going to over excavate, remove it, and
Oh, okay.
dispose of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Same with the underground storage tanks.
Okay. Let's see. I am also just wondering how many businesses are located in Gilman Square and how many employees currently work there? Okay, so that's full-time and part-time, mostly part-time, or?
Darlene,
Oh,
could you
come on
come up
up.
to the microphone, please?
I apologize.
I think we heard you say 113.
Do I have to announce myself again?
Yes, if you would.
I'm Darlene Cohen, Gilman Gallery. In my spot, 113, and prior to that, in Lombardi's, there was probably about 15 to 20 people employed. It's sisters next door. She has a rotating staff besides herself, so there's 3 or 4. There was a furniture store next door to me, Home Furnishings. There was 5 people rotating in there. The Barstool place was family, so there was 4 of them in there. The gun shop, I think, had 6 or 7 people, I think. I believe that's what, maybe rotating 9, I'm not sure. And let's see, who else was in there? The Barstools, that's, yeah.
So you're looking for other space, it sounds like.
There is no space in Issaquah.
Right, I know,
Issaquah
but-
lacks retail. So I'm sorry to say that, but it's true.
Does anybody know about the other
I tried,
businesses?
and Tom helped me, but unfortunately, as we know, Albertsons was bought out by a company from Albertsons people, and the land is leased land. And Savers from Value Village is just, they haven't even finished the lease, right, Tom? They're not finished with it. It's going to close. But he was looking for somebody, he's taking 2/3 of it. He was looking for somebody through the other small part left to pay for his part. And so we've been trying to negotiate with him, but he won't budge. And, you know, for 19,000 square feet, and I wouldn't even call it a vanilla shell myself, and if I split it with somebody, I get a little entryway that I have to pay for that would cost me, the entryway would cost me probably $9,000-10,000 a month. It doesn't work. So there's no place for us to move here. You're going to lose us. And we've been a destination here for how long? I don't know. I mean, there's nobody else here who wins awards but us. And I'm really proud of that because I've got a great amount of people that work in that place, and I have a wonderful, terrific staff. We are a real showcase, I hate to say it.
In answer to your question,
Well, I do.
at least one of the businesses that was there has relocated across Gilman Boulevard.
Okay.
They went, yeah, the gun shop went up above, up there,
Right.
but they don't take very much space.
Right,
Because
but
guns
they-
don't,
but
you know, guns are.
The employees are still there.
Yeah, well, the guns, you know, the gun shop, it was just like a small place like this, you know, not even as big as this, about half. So,
Thank you.
all right, you're welcome.
I think that's it for me. I really like the project, so thank you very much. Oh, thank you.
Commissioner?
Thanks. You made a great presentation, so thank you.
Thank you.
Jerry, I've got a couple of questions. The first one, we seem to, I thought, gloss over it a little bit, was traffic concurrency. I find it hard to believe that there's not going to be an impact, or that with all these units and cars and peak times, we used to talk an awful lot about that, and this time all of a sudden it says not going to be a problem, and we moved on.
Well, it's not that there won't be a problem, it's not a major problem, though. There will be 74 new trips that will be generated by the project. And the concurrency that was done on the project did talk about the delay time at the intersections, which is fairly small, and if it's below 5 seconds, it's not changing the level of service. There will be a traffic signal required at 7th and Gilman as part of this project. And further traffic review even on the entrances on 7th too. You know, whether there has to be a middle left turning lane, how much, and even with the Gilman Boulevard left turning lane too. There will be an impact, but it's not great. They are getting full credit, of course, for the retail center that's there today.
Okay. It just, I just have some heartburn with the fact that many units coming in on Gilman Boulevard, and it's not going to be a problem. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me, but I will go along.
But there is, I mean, there definitely is going to be a larger impact on 7th. I think about 90% of the traffic will be using 7th Avenue to enter the site. 10% would be using Locust, Gilman.
It mentioned in the presentation that ditch on 7th is a stream now.
It's going to be tunneled.
It's going to be covered and converted to a culvert. Is there a problem with that in regards to the fact that now it's got a habitat and stuff, and if we put it into a culvert, the habitat goes away? Is there an offset for that? Not that I necessarily think that it's really a habitat, it's a ditch, but.
Well, one of the things that I've learned is it doesn't matter what you think or what I think. It has habitat value.
Could you identify
But actually, I want to go back to your traffic issue first.
Could you mention your name?
I'm sorry, Tom Bartholomew with Lennar. I think it's pretty safe to say that the traffic situation is going to get better. The numbers and the models that were used to determine the difference in terms of trips in the current condition, assuming it's leased, obviously, assuming it's fully leased, compared with what it's going to be with 344 units, we weren't allowed to take into account people who ride buses, people who work at home, and all those kinds of things. So I think the impact that's been demonstrated in the traffic report is probably actually overstating it. In addition to that, we're taking an intersection at 7th and Gilman that's currently level of service F. So it's already failing. And we're going to make it level of service C with a light. So I think, counterintuitive as it might be, I think the situation out there is probably going to get better.
Is there an issue with two traffic lights that close together? Because you're going to have you got a traffic light just the next intersection up. I mean, it's very clear. I don't know what the rules are.
The traffic signal to the west here.
To the west.
To the west over at the Issaquah Commons.
Yeah. Isn't there a traffic light right there? The next one, it's up by,
So what we'll do with all of the questions that you're asking is we'll prepare this briefing response memo, so sometimes we don't have answers,
Okay.
but we'll have them in the memo.
we don't need to take time, that's fine. Thank you, sir. Back to, well, except for the habitat, I guess that.
According to Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife, that is a Class 3 or Class 4 stream. And we worked with them extensively to try to develop a mitigation plan in exchange for taking that habitat. And so what we've actually done is provided a great deal more than what we're taking up in terms of square footage. The swale becomes massive amount of habitat, and also what we worked out with WDFW really had more to do with riparian, the changes we're making along the riparian corridor. So cutting back that slope and creating that bench, which creates habitat.
Okay, that answers that, I think. Jerry, again, I see there's just a little bit of, maybe just an further explanation. Compared to prior packages that we've done, we've always had a big discussion on pervious and impervious surface. In this one, we got one line. And is that because it's almost all parking lot now, and so whatever we do is going to be an improvement, or? Because all we talk about is that it's 90% maximum, and this is going to end up being approximately 65%.
It will, under the old code, this used to have our retail zoning, and the maximum impervious then was 65%. I don't know what the shopping center has. They may be, close to that being so much pavement. They are providing about 65%, and that's because they got so much with the park, the restored area along the creek, the new grassy swell that's come in, and all the islands, peninsulas, and parking lot improvements.
Okay, well, in the past, we've focused in on that an awful lot in these different projects. This one just seems to be one line that it's okay and we're moving on. I just want to make sure that we
Would you like to see a number? Then I can give you the numbers then too.
Well, I think probably the change is that in the past, the impervious percentage was so much lower that there was a lot of work to figure out how you were going to comply and studying it in a lot of detail. Because the Central Issaquah Plan significantly increased that, and this is so far below that maximum, there really isn't a lot to discuss. So
asking a question, that's all.
Yeah.
In regards to parking, the parking that's created on 7th and Locust, is that included in your parking totals for off-street parking, or is that just general street parking?
That's just general parking that's required as part of the street standards. They do not get credit for this for the apartments.
Okay.
It's not part of their count.
I had the same kind of concern that the lady that spoke earlier said in regards to the number of parking, and I understand there's changed standards and stuff.
Yeah,
but I'd be real concerned with the number of parking spots in particularly that many apartments.
Yeah, and under the old code, we had a minimum of 2 stalls per unit. We did not establish a maximum under the old code. This one does. And it's based on the number of bedrooms too now.
Okay, well, we'll see what happens.
And one thing that we can do in the response, and we've had to do this with some other projects, is provide a little more context about the amount of parking that we're seeing needed. There have been some really detailed studies in King County about the parking trends and especially with these kind of units, and we can provide you a lot more information in the response.
Okay, thank you. The other, it was mentioned just fleeting in passing by one of the citizens that spoke, I guess, was the word affordable came up. Is there any requirements for a number of these units to be affordable housing? We have no, I don't know if there's anything there's nothing granted to the developer for,
There's some requirements.
Percentage of
There's
units
some requirements if they're going to build extra taller buildings. They're not within that range.
Okay.
I think the term that you probably heard was workforce housing, which often is affordable housing. I'm not sure that this.
I just wondered if there was one of the incentives that we talked about in the past in regards to developing the Central Issaquah Plan was affordable housing as an incentive to them.
Okay.
I didn't know if they were giving any incentive in regards to the number of these units that were going to be classified as affordable. There's just a little bit in the report. It says construction standards. What's the fire department say about these units and the area they go in? In the past we've talked an awful lot about access, turning radiuses.
And that's been looked at by the fire department too for their ladder trucks, and they've accepted the radius and turns on the site.
And they've accepted?
They have, yes.
Okay.
There was a whole sheet that, I mean, I don't know whether it ended up in your packet, but
So it's in the building standards or the construction standards. Was it in here too? I missed it.
there was a sheet that, where they demonstrated, you know, how the fire trucks would move through and East Side Fire
I
and
saw a little
Rescue.
drawing of a fire truck. I just want to make sure that that was their drawing. I want to make sure our fire department liked their drawing. Okay. The flooding is a concern, and I guess none of us will ever know until the 100-year flood happens, and we'll see if the basement fills full of water and we swim in it for a couple of days. I was also concerned in regards to the access to the buildings, that all the surrounding roads would be underwater on a 100-year flood. And I don't know if there's anything that can, maybe the solution that Connie suggested, you got to just tell the residents that it could happen. And I don't know if that, you know, the sky, Chicken Little, the sky is falling type thing, but it was a concern. I want to, as for my comments, I think it's great. I looked at the color selection, and I think my shirt is perfect. Yeah, you want to, it matches your red very nicely, or whatever it is.
You're such a slave to fashion.
I know. Reminds me of a certain gas station we argued about once before. And yeah, I thought the pictures were fun. The only thing that bothered me about it was when I first got the package and started looking through these drawings. I got to the site elevations, you know, the east-west stuff. Look at it. The building looks just like this piece of paper. Big rectangle. And I wish there was some way to change the modulation. I mean, looking down at it, or from the front, or from an angle, you see all those angles on the side. But if you look at it from I-90 as you're going along, it's one big rectangle. And I don't know if there's anything that you can do. And I don't know if we can put something on the roof. I don't know if that'll comply with you're right at the limitation now for height, I guess. But I don't know if there's any modulation, vertical modulation, that can be added to the buildings to break up these big rectangles, which is basically what you're looking at. And if you had something that, a turd on the end or something in the middle, you know, something that would just break up that upper level so it doesn't look like just big rectangle. That's what I would like to see. The work you've done on the swale and the landscaping, it'll be a gorgeous piece of property compared to what it is now. And I look forward to the next stage. I also would like to thank the members of the public. I'm sure the chairman was going to do that, but it always makes our job much easier when we hear from people that are concerned enough to come to meetings. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Carl. I'm not going to go over a lot of the things that have already been said, but I've got a couple of questions. Is access to the buildings going to be secure, as in a keypad? Okay, so the public access that we're encouraging is not going to endanger the security of the residents because they can't get into the building unless they have a keypad access, okay? On the crossing there of 7th Avenue, is there going to be a pedestrian warning such as there is by the hatchery across Newport? And if there isn't, why not?
Where the shared route would cross?
Yeah.
There would be signage. I don't know if there would be anything beyond signage.
I would suggest that, and this gets into the comment, I mean, the question is there anything planned there? And if there isn't, I would suggest that maybe we look at the same standards that were used for the one there by the hatchery across Newport, because this is going to significantly, we've all heard it's going to significantly increase the traffic on 7th. And people are going to be running back and forth there. People are going to be coming out and looking one way to see traffic and then going the other way across that pedestrian, which I think is a great idea and it's very logical. But the kind of thing that flashes that they've got there on Newport by the hatchery, I think would be a very good investment for security. Those are actually all the questions, the other questions that I had have been addressed by my fellow commissioners, so I'm just going to go into my brief final comments. When I first, and I'm going to be really bluntly honest about this, when I first heard about this, you know, I love this Central Issaquah plan, the theory and everything, and participated in some of the workshops, and not to the extent that Commissioner Morgan has, but it just seemed exceptionally logical to me that it's either, when we look at growth in Issaquah, it's either up or out, and pretty clear how I feel about that. But I had serious questions about the floodwater and serious questions about the traffic. I want to thank the staff for this material, which I used to walk the site. I've talked to members of the Rivers and Stream Board, and I will say flatly that my concerns about traffic and water control have been addressed as far as I'm concerned. It will be definitely a significant improvement over what is there now. I understand the employment issues, and that's regrettable, but in terms of the execution of the Central Issaquah plan going forward and how Issaquah accommodates growth, it's a good thing. Now, I'm going to say what I alluded to at the beginning, and that is that there is both a challenge and an opportunity for Lennar and for the city, frankly, in my opinion, because you're the first. So everything that comes after is going to be measured against what you do. So you're setting the standard for the Central Issaquah plan. And that carries with it, I would suggest, that carries with it a responsibility. I was going to say burden, but I won't go there. It carries a special responsibility. I think you've heard from members of the public and several members of the commission, if not in fact all of us, some concern about the design of the building. What went through my mind is if you looked at that building and looked at some of the newer stuff in Mercer Island and some of the newer stuff in Bellevue or Redmond, it's indistinguishable. There's nothing that says Issaquah on it. It's a contemporary structure. It's it's the design standards are very, very commonly used on new multiple use buildings. I get it. They're absolutely green and up to standards on energy use, but there's nothing that says Issaquah, and there's nothing that says distinct about that architecture as I see it. And frankly, I think the opportunity is there at this stage in the game to put something in there that's a landmark that people look at and say, oh yeah, that's that new apartment complex in Issaquah. Wow. And that's maybe what we're all looking for here is the wow and the long-term wow. I'm not talking about something that's faddish, and I'm not talking about something that's contemporary colors, which the green is kind of, I don't know what that's going to look like 5 years from now. But something, as has been noted by my fellow commissioners, that's going to have the wow factor and the distinctive factor for a long time to come, because you're setting the standard. And I think you've done a great job. It's a very challenging lot. It's a big challenge to come in and try to deal with something as different as the Central Issaquah plan. But I believe that the staff and the applicant, and quite honestly, the way this has been executed by the city over the years with the public input is a model. And it's a continuation of why Sunset Magazine picked Issaquah as the best suburb in west of the Mississippi. This is the kind of thing that does it. And it's particularly important for people in the public, as my fellow commissioner noticed and has said, it's particularly important to this process for people in the public to come in here and participate and listen and do their homework and sit through an entire meeting. And I can't tell you, on behalf of the commission, I can't tell you how much we do appreciate that. So with that.
Do you mind if I throw in my comment?
Oh, your comment, I apologize.
Sorry, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be quick. Number one, I'm extremely pleased that we are seeing a large residential project in the Central Issaquah plan. A big focus, the city and the citizens put a ton of work into the Central Issaquah plan, and a big focus of that was to get more residential development in downtown Issaquah. So it's so gratifying to see a large project come into town. I understand the concern about losing retail, which is never good, but we have far more retail than residential in downtown Issaquah right now. This helps bring some balance, and long-term, more residents will bring more demand for more retail. I have been very impressed with the creative design on this site. When I heard this was going to be developed, I kind of wondered how would anybody build in a floodplain, and I think it's extremely creative what you've done with the swales, with the trails, the connections. It's a great looking project, and thanks for the presentation. And also thanks for staff for the excellent report that you put together the first time through in the CIP, and a difficult thing to convey, and it was very helpful, the report that you did. I don't think a second path through the Building C courtyard is necessary. I'd agree with the applicant that creating that area for the residents separated and with a berm that creates that deterrent to people just crossing through there anyway. I would agree with the applicant with that. I do also agree with Commissioner Harrison that Chair Harrison, that it's important, I think, to get some kind of flashing sign at that crosswalk, because hopefully there's going to be a lot of traffic on that trail and people going from here over to the retail area. And when I say traffic, I mean a lot of pedestrian traffic, so I'd love to see them protected.
So could I just add one comment? I've talked to the Issaquah police about those signs, because there was another location where we had thought that was a good idea, and they were fairly resistant. So this is a great opportunity to go back and have that conversation again. So we'll find out more information, but I just want to warn you that I've gotten kind of mixed messages about.
I don't. Yeah. It doesn't have to be the kind of thing that's on Newport, as far as I'm concerned. It just has to be something that addresses people's attention.
We'll get more information on that.
Somebody with a baseball bat.
That'd be great. A question about the parking being adequate. And this was a big focus of the CIP. Ms. Marshall, I think it was brought this up as a concern. As Jerry mentioned, the code had been 2 stalls per unit, regardless of size. So a studio unit would require 2 parking stalls. One of the ideas behind the CIP is to encourage people to get out of their cars, to not require a car to live in downtown Issaquah. So number one, I don't think a developer wants to build apartments that people won't rent because there's not adequate parking. But number two, the Central Issaquah plan wants to reduce parking in order to encourage people to use alternative forms of transportation, whether it's the bus or a bike or walking to work, perhaps at a store or an office in downtown Issaquah. So I know it can be a concern, but hopefully we've got a lot of people that would still want to live here and say, you know what, maybe I don't need a second car, maybe I can do short-term rental, something else. I do agree with Ms. Marshall, we should have a interpretive info, something at the creek, as she brought up. And another good point that Connie made about the buffer vegetation should be considered landscaping, so it's perpetually maintained. I didn't realize that was the case, and so thank you for bringing that up, and I think it's a great idea. As for the flood information, the City of Issaquah provides an excellent comprehensive pamphlet on flooding for citizens. The Issaquah Citizens Corps last year delivered pamphlets to everybody that lived within a certain number of feet of Issaquah Creek. We went around door to door delivering these to make people aware. So you should be getting it anyway, but I would suggest you talk to the city. It's a great pamphlet. It's already there, and it would be excellent for the residents. And then finally, I think on the building design, I think they're very interesting buildings in a lot of ways, but I'd agree, the monotone roof line, I think is a bit of an issue. And the fact that it only modulates in 2 planes, I like the modulation that's been done, but it only really modulates in 2 planes. And if there can be some angled elements added to the building, whether it's some shading over windows, things like that, I think that could be very helpful. And I think we've heard a few commissioners talk about the design issue. And again, thank you for coming in, and thanks for the public for your participation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there are no further comments from members of the commission, then I will declare this meeting to be adjourned. Thank you very much.